Off like a herd of thunder and turtles to start this one. Hi there, my name is Ron Zucker. Welcome to the program. Today, we are going to go through the second video I'm going to do on Classic F1. The game, I've played some with it, I've done some qualifying, and I've actually gotten a race almost to the first pit stop. And so, we're just going to show some things. I want to give a shout out to Lefty Dad 1, who made an absolutely wonderful tutorial over on the auto racing game form over at Delphi. And so it's certainly with his help that I've set up all my spreadsheets, or my giant spreadsheet, my 3 spreadsheets for this game. And so we're going to start with this one. This is the setup sheet. It would be helpful if I hit the right button. No, I don't want that. Thank you. This is my setup spreadsheet. We'll show you how that works in a moment. But what he told me to do was set up the columns in the following order up top. Names, the roll, and that is the 2 10-sided die roll. And I'll show you what that means in a minute. Actually, let's go over there. You see where Senna is highlighted in yellow? We're going to take a look at his card and then kind of go from there. So you see how big I've blown this up. This is also the sample card that you can find at the ASG Games website, which has the class where you can buy the classic F1 game. You can buy the print set, and where you can buy the download, and I had the download file. So to set up, you obviously need a driver's card, and I blew up Senna's here. And so the cool thing about this game is that you roll to see which car you're going to run for any particular racer. The gold stuff there between 40 and 49 on a 2D10 roll is the perfect car. There's 11 golden cars in the set that comes with the game, and Ayrton Senna has one of them. Is 1988 Honda Marlboro McLaren that won his first of 3 championships. You see, he started 164 Formula One races. He won 41, had 68 poles, 19 fastest laps, and 614 points before his untimely death at Imola in 1994. So the first thing you do when you look at the card and you set up the sheet is that B column is rolls. And you see for Senna, he rolled an 80. And if you look at the card, there's only one thing for 80. It's a Honda Marlboro McLaren, a 3.5-liter McLaren MP4/6B Honda V12 that he drove the first part of the 1992 season. Now, on my sheet, we put the year, and that's 1992. Now, where you see Honda Marlboro McLaren in that 80, that is the constructor of the car. And you can run, if you so choose, a constructor championship, as well as depending on what you want to do. Right now, I believe you can buy the 1976 season, the 2019 season, and the greatest drivers. And in the package I bought, the 2019 and all the championship, 33 world championship drivers were included. So that 7 that you see by the mark there is what you would put in that box. And that is the first of several ratings that you got to put down. 7 is 1 is the best. The higher the lower the number, the better the constructor. So a 7. So we put, why did I put a 3? Did I mess that up? There is no 7. There isn't even a 3 on this card. Well, good job, Ron. Okay, so I should have put a 7 there. The next thing you see in the second box where I read the 3.5-liter McLaren MP4 V12 3M10. Now the first number is the quality of the car. Again, lowest number is better, and the M10 is for mechanical checks. that is a 20-sided die check, just in case his car comes up. 0 being the best means the car isn't going to have a mechanical failure. 20 being the worst. You see poor Ascari down there being a 16 M20. So Senna's Casey's a 10. Now we look at the driver rating. And we skip down here. Now you have two choices here, speed or tactics, and that depends on the track. And I chose to do my first race at Monza. So that would be in MON, where he won 6 times. So his race rating for speed is a 0. And that is what I put in the driver. I add those together, and it should have been 10 instead of 6. And I divide by 3, and I get a base of 2. And that base is important because we use it all the way along. So those are the things you got first, things you have to read off the card. And remember, it's 2d10 for that. And then you just kind of transpose the numbers onto your sheet. I highly recommend that you computerize this if you want. Obviously, you can do it on any piece of paper. But I think the spreadsheet idea is pretty handy. You have all sorts of columns. And trust me, when we get to the race one, it goes all the way up to Q. Next thing I write down is information. And I'll put the pointer here. There's 2 things that you have to keep track of. One is his rain rating, which rain would slow cars down, but as you see, the plus arrow means that he's an excellent rain driver, and that's not going to affect anything. If he goes for red line speed, and I don't really know what that is yet, you take 3 off his overall rating. Record that for later use. The team, McLaren, and the K column, and then the pole number. Did I get this one right? Okay. So depending on the season and the driver, they have different pole numbers. In the 88, 90, and 91, he was great to get that, and we will explain all those numbers later. But for our purposes, we're going to go with all others, and he is a 4 and a 41. Now, a 4 means that his initial pole qualifying rating is a 4. He could get bumped up or down if he rolled a 210-sider. If it reaches 1 to 41, I think that's what that means. But there's no rating there, so there really isn't any point doing it. So you take that 4, and you add it to 2, and you get 6, and divide that number by 2, and you get his qualifying rating of 3. And so all that stuff is there. You do it for all 20 drivers. It takes, once you get used to it, the fun part is rolling for all the different cars. Now, obviously, if you look at someone like, who's the oldest car in the field? Ascari, he's driving something from 1954. I can't show you because that's not included in the game. It is included in the game, but not included in any of the sample stuff. So the oldest car is from 1954, and the newest car, I think, or cars, there are 2 from the 2012 season, Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel. And so we're going to pretend that all these cars are somewhat equal in design, although trust me, something from 1954 is a bathtub with gas and a death trap, and the cars from 2012 are relatively safe compared to those. But it's fun. It's all about using the imagination. So what you do is you get all that information. A lot of it is transcribing. To find out your qualifying rating, you take your base rating, you add it to that first number in the pole rating, and then divide it by 2, which is how Senna got a base rating of 3. The lower the number, the better off you're going to be in the qualifying chart. So Vettel, Clark, Fangio, all were 1s. And so we move some of this information over to the qualifying chart. Now, I've sorted this out because it is I've done it already for this race. And you see who got the best time our best ratings at Monza. You go back to the setup. I put in my qualifying weather. You roll for that 2d6. On the first qualifying session was cloudy and dry. If you roll a 00, you roll again. At any point in the qualifying, you roll to or race, you roll to see if the weather has changed. Day 2, it's overcast and dry. I don't believe he has any of the track charts for your perusal, so I'm not going to show any of that. So qualifying, you copy over the names and the qualifying ratings, and you take your 2d10 and time 1 and time 2. You roll against the chart. Sometimes there's an X factor there. I didn't have any of those. The X you see for Brabham day 2 wasn't. He certainly wasn't going to beat his day 1 time, and he just didn't do it. You roll. The first number comes off the chart with the 2d10. And so, for, let's say Fangio, who ended up taking the pole, who had the best time in day 1? Kimi Räikkönen. So he had a 6 qualifying time, and so he must have rolled like under a 10. And so he got a 2. That's the first number, and then you roll again with 2d10, and that's the stuff after the decimal, a 213. And supposedly, according to the directions, if you roll a 1.50, that would be the equivalent of the best pole time, or you could use that for the pole time on a given year and then figure out the times after. I didn't do that, but that's how the game is figured out. So you can qualify any number of ways. The old-fashioned way was 2 days of qualifying, first day times, second day times. Whoever had the best time of the 2 runs is how you qualified on the field. On day 2, qualifying, Fangio rolled a good number and then rolled an 05 on a second. And so that's how he got his best time of 2.05. Alonso was the only other one to get that low. Speeds were much faster for most people the first day. You sort all that out. You put the best in there. It didn't take all that long to qualify. It's depending on how you want to do it. It is each driver gets 2 D10 rolls, so 40, 80 rolls for the qualifying. But really, qualifying in Formula One is very, very important. You could do it the modern way, which is everyone posts a time in day 1. You take the bottom 10 and freeze them, and then you go to day 2, do it. This is a 3-stage qualifying run. You run the top 10 for day 2. You freeze the bottom 5, and then you have the last 5 go in a shootout to see who gets the pole. But we just did it the old-fashioned way. So Fangio is on the pole. Now, I'll show you this with Senna's card. He would have been a 4. Now, if he rolled a 1 to 41 and had the pole, it wouldn't have changed it. But let's take a look at 1991. So if Senna had won the pole, and we were using his 1991 card, if he had rolled a 1 through 50, he would have had a -3 effect. And that goes on his base. And the base numbers determine how many squares you go on a given turn. A turn can be anywhere from 1 to 4 laps. But you got to do all the calculations with that. I thought that qualifying was the most was easy to understand. I didn't have any incidents, no X charts, no crashes, no potential fast laps. It was very straightforward. You take your best time and put them there, and that gets you into the field. Had no problem figuring out the process once we got into qualifying. The setup, thanks to Lefty Dad 1, it was easy. You add the control or the constructor rating to the car rating, ignoring the M stuff. That's the first number there. And then the driver, you take that total and you divide it by 3 for the base. Now, if you get a rounded number, you can roll the 2d10 and round up or down depending on what you want to do. Generally, if it's like 50 or lower, you go down. If it's 51 or up, you go higher. And that's your base. And figuring out the pole qualifying, there was some bumps. I took them out. I just wanted to run it. You roll those two 20-sided or 10-sided dice to see if there's a bump. If they hit it, I think you can improve on the numbers on the right. So Sebastian Vettel, if he had rolled a 1 to 47, we could have dropped his rating down to a 1. And a 1 and a 1, well, he got the 1 anyway. So, not quite sure how the hell that happened. But, just means that you qualify, and the lower your qualifying number, the better off you're going to do and get the pole. Because you're going to find out in a moment, it's difficult to pass in Formula One. So, the setup took me about an hour, but I took my time to do it. You got to go through all the cards, get all the ratings. The next time it won't be so difficult. The longest part is going through the roles and figuring out which car you're actually driving. Hopefully some of this, or all of this, makes a little bit of sense. Let's take a look at the race chart. And this is what I've got going on. I set up this sheet. Again, Lefty Dad told me to do, or those things, names, the base rating, spaces, M, which is the after the car in the car, in Senna's case M10. The driver rating, which is different from the base. Again, here you can see it in Senna's card here. Speed 0, tactics 1, and an average would be a half. And since Monza is a speed track, we take the speed rating, which is 0, and that is Senna's driver rating. Let me fill that. Well, highlight that again. So his driver rating is 0. All the driver, that's everyone's driver rating. Senna is the best. Fangio a 1, Clark a 1. Anyway, it's all on the cards, and depending on whether it's a speed track, a base track, or a tactics track, you put in there. And so it's a speed track, so that's where the driver's rating comes from. Jenson Button and Graham Hill, not the greatest drivers in the world. In this race, anyway. In the info, it's not raining, so I don't need to add any of the rain stuff. The J rating you see there for Mansell would be a jump rating. You can jump the start. And I don't think any of those came into fact, or I screwed up. Moved, you determine that after the race, or that's how I interpreted it. So you know how many cars, or how many places up or down you moved, gained or lost from qualifying. Fangio is flying right now. The 10% rule, which is columns H, I, and J, has to do with if you're a really bad driver. Let's say, I think the only one that would have been here would be Graham Hill, who could only move, his rating is 11, and so he can only move 9 spaces. But if he was lucky enough to qualify well, that he could hold that position based on a number of things. I don't really know what it is. We didn't have anybody that was there. I used my judgment. The columns are there because 10% means that they start off in a higher base for the first 10% of the race. So in Monza's case, it would have been the first 5 laps. And then he either stays in that position or reverts. It's kind of like a Cinderella thing. Turns back into the pumpkin and go there. The pit roll, pit info, and the difference in the pit result, that has to do with the pit stops, which I haven't done yet. We are on a pit lap, and so everyone will now come in to do their pit stops. Those are all individual rolls. There's pit charts. You record all the information there, and then you figure it out. The O, out or retired. So if there's an accident or a mechanical issue, you mark it there, the lap, and maybe what that is. So you can record it after the race, and then you stop sorting the cars. Random numbers, which is column P. Everyone has a random number because when you roll your dice, you roll a 6-sided dice, you roll 2 10-sided die, and then you roll a 20-sided die. The six-sided die pretty much tells you whether or not you can pass. The two 10-sided die, read the first one, tells you where on the track chart you have to read for that particular lap and how many laps to use. The random number is a 20-sided die. So let's say I rolled, Senna's number 11. So let's say I rolled a 2 for the 6, 55 for the 2d10, and an 11. So I know that on the track chart, I would look at what my number 5 was, and that would be Senna. Senna has the action on that card. Follow the card, what it tells you, and go from there. And the base space tells me how many spaces each driver gets per lap. Now, you have to pass cars, and passing is a whole different thing. But I think I have it figured out, and that's just to tell me how many spaces they should go if they were in clear and unencumbered space. If you look at Alonso here on line 7, yeah, you can see line 7. He's at 313, and he can move a total of 17 spaces. Well, so can Prost, and so can Kimi Räikkönen. So unless they have a chance to pass him, and we'll get into what I like and don't like about the rules in a couple minutes here, they're all just kind of hanging along there, waiting for their chance, trying not to get hurt. Now, Senna had caught up from them. He was way back in the pack, broke free, and because you broke free, he was able to run his full 20 squares per lap and was able to catch up to the pack. And I think that pretty much the base space I added and everything else was there. The lap is just so I know what lap they're on, 23 of 53. Sunny and dry is the weather again. If I start a lap with a 00 on the 2d10, then there's a chance that the weather changes and then different ratings come into play. So that's how I have my sheet set up. And as you can see, Mr. Fangio is well up on Nigel Mansell, who was just taking over second place over PK. So I'm not sure if I'm playing this, how right I'm playing this, but it is about a bunch of fun, and the pit roll will take some time to do. I'm not going to do that tonight, but I think they figured in 45 minutes to an hour for a race, maybe an hour and 15. That's not unreasonable to do, and I forgot I hadn't touched the screen in 5 minutes, so you got the blank. That's not unreasonable. It's fun. And that's the key thing. And that button. Okay. So some initial thoughts. I know that's a lot to go through. The setup I find really fun to do because it gives everything a variability. Even if you race on the same track all the times. And I think there are 54 tracks. I have them all released for the game. There were 20 tracks released with the game, proper game itself, which I believe was the 2019 set. And then the additional purchases were the 1976 tracks and some classic tracks. I like the older classic tracks, such as the Nürburgring Nordschleife, which is 10 miles per lap. There's one track, which pretty much is a city street in Berlin in the 30s with what's called the Wall of Death. You think the banking at Daytona and Talladega are high. Oh, my goodness gracious. And some American courses, too. Watkins Glen, Detroit, and one that will race for Al at Caesar's Palace, where all the best boxing matches. We'll probably do the Glory Days Grand Prix or something like that. Okay, so the setup part is fun because everyone gets a different car. It's not all... You can do a specific season replay. If you got 20 drivers from 2019, you just line those cars up and go right at it. And I'm sure that the replay will come out pretty close to real life, especially if you're a Lewis Hamilton fan. But the variability, again, you could play Monza with the base conversion of that 100 times, and you're not going to get the same 20 cars on the grid. It's all going to be different. You can use, which I think is great because these are the very best of the very best drivers, and you don't want everyone kind of bunched up. So that part is fun. once I figured out how to figure out the base total, you take three numbers, you divide it by three, you get the base. The setup for the qualifying, I gotta go through again. I think I got that pretty much right. Not completely understanding what the second numbers is, whether that just is the qualifying number or what. But again, it just gives it some more variability. I liked how qualifying went. It simply was you rolled your 2d6, you cross-checked one number with the other, you put another number in, and then you re-roll those 2d10, and you got a decimal time. Again, you can break it down into real times for a given track, but really for me, that's not all that important. I got my field, and again, qualifying is exceptionally important for this, as you can tell from my race, because Mr. Fangio is rated a 1, and so he gets the maximum number of 20 for being a positive number for squares, and no one's going to touch him. Someone's going to have to come get him. It's possible he could also have a mechanical failure because his M rating for his car is a 4, or he could spin out, or any of the other variety of things, because accident chances happen and stuff like that. So this isn't done and dusted halfway through. He could have a terrible pit stop when I pick this up again too. But right now he is cruising. And that's what happens in Formula One. Anthony considers a lap traffic to be 150 squares. And we've got lap traffic. He is lapped, 1, 2, 3, 7 cars already, but Monza's fast, and he is just flying right by. The start is dictated with just make sure that I don't get the screen of death here. You refer to our chart for that, and when I rolled, nothing happened, so there was nothing weird off the start. It was a gentlemanly start. If I'm reading the rules right, when you reference, as I said, you reference a track chart to figure out whether the driver in question is going to go off a speed rating, a base rating, whether he can pass. Passing rules, I'm really not quite clear on yet. Depending on sometimes if you're within 2 squares or 1 square, if you can pass. There's 2 pages of passing charts. What I did was I made every driver aggressive and every defender aggressive, and that's a 2D roll check. I don't think I've had to go to the X chart for that yet. 1 to 40 is pass, 41 to 84 is fail. You can have accidents, you can clip cars and all. It's been a gentleman's race so far. I need to read further into that, but for me, aggressive is fine. It's just kind of take some time out. Sometimes I'm not real clear. I've had a couple mechanical checks. And again, because I'm using the same 20-sided die, you just gotta roll twice. It's a lot to keep track of in this game. And I don't really want to give a thorough review until I finished it, the pit rules and that. But I'm liking what I'm seeing so far. This would be something I would play again. I know that they've asked Anthony about whether they would do a computer version of this. He's talked to Richard Hanna, the genius behind Anthony's other 2 computer games, Time Travel Tennis and Classic Soccer, and Richard really hasn't touched it yet. Computerizing would take a lot of the stuff out. You could at least see the car selection process and get the ratings and just run the race, but it hasn't been all that arduous. I would think that having a calculator nearby would be really helpful. Writing down the base space number on my spreadsheet is a good thing. I forgot for the slower cars, if they were in traffic with others, to back them up. So everyone's just kind of rolling around, and I finally now have some separation at the middle of the field. I will do a video after the race is finished. Get some final impressions of the first race. And there. But again, for a second video, the setup I like. The qualifying was very easy, all things considered. And the race, I think it needs to be simplified some. There's a lot to keep track of in your head. And if I have 80% of it right, I'm doing pretty good. I had a couple of fast lap rolls, and I forgot to check the card, so they got the fast lap. And again, with any game, you obviously can do some homebrew for what you find that fits. There's no wrong way to play a game as long as it's close. So I'm looking forward to doing the pit rolls and seeing if we get all 20 cars through this field and then finishing up the race, because I'm in a one-stop race, so there'll be about 25 to 30 laps. There's 30 laps left, and then we'll do the pit roll and then there. So we'll go through further. Some of it is not natural yet, but I'm having fun. Am I picturing this as Bonza? Not yet, but I think a lot of it is, as when you pick up any game, the first few times you play it, it's much more, am I doing this right? And not necessarily a lot of flow. Although I can see that this is Fangio's home track, and he is just loving it. All right, okay, I took a half hour for that. So that's my second in a video of impressions for Classic F1. I will do another one after I finish the race and give some final thoughts to that and figure out what I want to do for a project. I'm Ron Chuck, and thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you the next time.